Welcome to Metro Talk. I'm Ken Scheffel. Thanks for being with us. Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, is here. Welcome, Jim.
Okay.
And Pat Gowan, one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch, is alongside as well. Welcome, Pat.
I can't.
Pat, lawmakers in Springfield are looking at legislation right now that would reduce taxes for businesses, would reduce taxes for low-income families. The whole premise behind this is that the reduced taxes would be offset by gains in employment. Bottom line, though, if those gains in employment don't happen, the municipalities get hurt because they're going to see fewer tax dollars. Is it worth the risk?
Well, golly, you like to think if you're going to gamble it, you get to be part of making the decision to get in the game, but that doesn't happen with this kind of stuff. The state says, hey, we're gambling, and the munis say, okay. This came about, as I understand, because there was a little bodega that employed 6 people, and they said, look, if we don't get some tax relief here, we're going to have to pull stakes out of Illinois. And the governor said, well, we can't be losing those 6. No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. It was the parent companies of the Chicago Board of Trade, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, people with real money and real clout who were saying, hey, you know, maybe we ought to go somewhere else if Illinois' tax climate isn't going to improve. And so we've got a plan on the table to improve it for them and some other businesses. Sears and some others would get some tax breaks that are too complicated for a mere mortal like me to understand, but that by the 3rd year will be causing an $850 million hole in Illinois revenue, and I can't understand that number. That includes, by the way, tax breaks for the poor. I presume that was added on to get the Democrats to agree to it, since the Democrats might not have been so happy with big business getting tax breaks. So now this is going to extend the earned income credit for low-income Illinoisans. So they get a little piece of the pie too. But in the end, by the time there's actually a revenue positive effect, like in the 1st year, but by the 3rd year it's an $850 million. God, I'm throwing billion around too much. Heaven's sakes, $850 million, which is, 85/100ths of a billion, a hole in the budget that they're hoping will be plugged by jobs and employment, at least not losing jobs, and the communities go along with it. This is probably something slightly short of making it up as you go along, but it has that feel about it, It's like, this is the crisis of the day, so here's the answer of the day, and who knows what tomorrow's crisis will be, or what the answer will be, or what it will cost. I just have the feeling as a taxpayer sometimes that no one is looking at it all holistically and saying, this is the way it's going to be. They sort of did that with the income tax increase, which also increased income taxes on business as well as individuals. And now this looks like it's one way of sort of backing away from this. As one legislator pointed out, it also would reach its full impact just as the income tax increase in Illinois, which if you recall was temporary, wink wink, temporary, theoretically would be ending. So we would be facing a loss of the income tax revenue and this hole in the budget all at the same time. I don't fully understand it. Stay tuned. We'll hear more about it.
Well, for the past 3 years, the feds haven't been able to increase employment. The state hasn't had any luck increasing employment. Can this legislation suddenly give us more jobs to offset that loss of tax money?
Well, it doesn't seem likely. I saw an editorial cartoon somewhere a day or two ago that had Governor Perry talking about how many jobs he created in Texas, and Governor Romney talking about how many jobs he'd created in Massachusetts, and you got President Obama at the White House saying, I thought you guys said government doesn't create jobs. Whether government saves and creates jobs is in no small part a function of what you're trying to get accomplished and what you can say in the moment and what people will believe in the moment. But it seems like when we think of government as having gotten beyond the bounds of what our forebears may have anticipated, I don't have any idea how they would have reacted to the idea of all this government money and sending business to do something or not do something, but I don't think they would have understood it either.
Well, let's follow the bouncing ball here, okay? Last January, the state implements a 67% increase in personal income taxes and about a 76.5% increase in business income taxes. Then the squeaky wheels begin to squeak. And it's like, oh, golly, we didn't think that they would complain when we raised their taxes by 76.5%. And now CME, which is the parent company of the Chicago Mercantile and the Board of Trade, and Sears and Caterpillar and a few other real big squeaky wheels said, you know, this just ain't gonna work out. Oh, and locally, at the same time, there was a problem going on with the possibility of a loss of 1,000 jobs from Olin Winchester here in East Alton. And the state said, oh, no, we'll work with you on that. You know, that 76.5% increase we just instituted, no, we'll talk to you about that. No, we'll work that out with you. So we raised taxes and then immediately begin to scamper when people, as long as they're big enough and have a big enough wheel, begin to react to that. So now it's like, oh no, well, you know, we're going to raise them for everybody else, but you guys, you know, we're going to take care of you. In the AP story that came out this week, one of the mayors in all of the municipalities in the whole state of Illinois, the first mayor quoted in that story was Mayor Hakes from Alton, talking about the impact that this was going to have on his community if the fuzzy math out of Springfield didn't work. Most of us tend to think that the fuzzy math in Springfield never works. You know, this is going to create all these new jobs, which will create new revenue streams for the state. This is on the heels of a report that came out saying that expansion of gambling into video machines was going to create multi-million dollars per year. It hasn't even had the rules drawn up yet so that they can get it off the board. They have another bill out there for expanding gambling that allegedly by adding 5 casinos and seats in the racetracks would add $1 billion in new revenue to the state. And a report comes out saying, well, if you're lucky, it might generate $160 million. Why would anybody believe any number that comes out of Springfield? If you know, God bless the mayors of these small municipalities, because, pardon me, they're about to get screwed here, because I don't believe the math. I don't believe by cutting taxes a little bit, you're going to go out and create the thousands of new jobs that the state needs just to get back to where we were a couple of years ago, much less get off of that 10% unemployment rate that the state is in now. No, I don't believe the numbers, and I think that this is a shell game that is using revenue that should go back to the communities the state serves or helps serve, and I think they're the ones that are going to get their backs broken on this because it's not going to work.
At the moment, I think almost anything can be proposed as increasing jobs and gain an immediate measure of support, and how dare you vote against something that was going to create jobs. So if I were in the legislature right now, I'd propose a pay increase for the lawmakers and say it would create jobs.
The only way the government creates jobs is by hiring more government workers. Any other way, you have no assurance.
I think there's a time when we tried that too.
Yeah, I think it was during the Depression, wasn't it?
We need to take a break. We'll have more Metro Talk right after this.
Hi, I'm Audrey Lucchese, and I'm from Alton, Illinois. I love music, and that's why I came to Lewis & Clark. It's been an amazing experience here at Lewis & Clark, working with students that are so talented, coming from all over the area, and they work so hard to follow their dreams. The music faculty at Lewis & Clark they're fantastic, and they're there every step of the way to push you to follow your dreams. One of the unique opportunities that I have had at Lewis & Clark is being able to record my own music with a fellow student here. Being able to record our music has opened doors for us in the music industry. My long-term goal is to finish here at Lewis & Clark and then to transfer to a 4-year school and finish my degree in music performance. I would recommend Lewis & Clark to another student because it is definitely a great place to get started and it can open so many doors for you.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
You're watching Metro Talk. I'm Kent Sheffield. Pat Gowan's here. Jim Schrader's here. Jim, lawmakers are considering two proposals that would cap wage increases for union workers. Supporters say everybody's got to share in this tough economy together. We can't be affording those wage increases. Obviously, the unions are fighting that idea. The bottom line is, should there be a cap on the wages that state workers can get as long as the economy's in bad shape?
As we all know, government doesn't work like private industry. And in the last few years, the newspaper industry, which is cyclical on the economy, has had very difficult times. We have gone through wage freezes. The Post-Dispatch has gone through similar. We've gone through mandatory unpaid furloughs, which amounts to a wage cut. It happened at the Post-Dispatch. It's happened at newspapers and media companies, not just newspapers, all over the United States. When my employees or Post-Dispatch employees or media employees or other manufacturing employees, other business employees that have gone through similar things, see what amounts to government workers that's still getting guaranteed raises every year because they're under contract to a government entity, it's very frustrating to the rank and file out there. It's interesting to me that I think it's 87% of the state workers, or the workers that are on the state payroll, belong to unions. And that's because of the safety and security and negotiating power that those employees feel. I feel for the employees thinking that they should have to have their wages capped, or they would have to go through furlough days or layoffs. But I don't see that they are any different than private industry. And many segments of private industry have gone through wage cuts, wage freezes, increases in benefit costs, having to pay more for insurance. Many state workers get their insurance for free, for example, which is a huge expense. Probably the most lavish pension plans of any employees are government workers, not just state workers, but government workers. You hate to call for anybody to get their wages frozen or to force layoffs or to force furloughs. But I don't know how the state is ever going to balance its budget until we start doing that. And oh, by the way, the elected officials are not members of unions, but they should go through it as well. I said to one person about, I think that every elected official at the state level should have to go salary free until we get this mess cleared up with the state budget. And it was pointed out to me, the problem is many of those guys are already millionaires, and they take these offices for the power and prestige, and it's not for the money. But I still think that would be an excellent symbolic act for the elected officials to go through the pain that the rest of the economy is going through.
Not like they haven't tried. Remember the superintendents of regional school superintendents, sort of an attempt in that direction.
Though that was selective.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
That was not themselves.
It was not themselves. What's good for the goose is not good for the rest of us.
Experiment.
Well, it was an experiment that told, that pointed out a very finite number of people by cutting off the superintendent.
I'm sure the legislators always intended to take their turn. And the governor.
Well, the bottom line is, should there be a cap on union wages until the state gets out of this financial mess?
You know what's been done in the past is the governor negotiates the contract and then hands the legislature the bill. And this is the legislature saying, you know what, no matter what you negotiate, we're going to cap what we're willing to pay for. Okay, so you can negotiate away, but in the end, here's what we're willing to pay and not a penny more. And it's understandable in tough times that the people with the purse strings will want a larger voice in this. I think a missed piece of significance about this is the political implication. The House is controlled by Democrats. The Senate is controlled by Democrats. The governor is a Democrat, and yet they can't seem to get together well enough on this to preclude the sense that the legislature needs to protect itself with a law to make sure that the governor doesn't run away with their purse strings. They don't trust the guy. If this was a Republican legislature and Democrat governor, it would make more sense. But under these circumstances, this is, to me, fairly visible evidence of something we already have plenty of indications to, that Mike Madigan, the Speaker of the House, and Cullerton, the President of the Senate, probably don't trust Governor Quinn a whole lot, so they're trying to install safeguards against their own party member. And that sort of lays a template for other dealings between the legislature and the governor that I think aren't good.
Well, and vice versa. He doesn't trust them either. Nobody trusts anybody in Springfield anymore. We see it on a grander scale. We just came out of the super committee that had a deadline of today, by the way, to come up.
Taping on Tuesday.
We're taping on Tuesday. Had a deadline of today to come up with a plan that could be voted on by tomorrow. The deadline was big Thanksgiving, to avoid $1.2 trillion in mandatory cuts. This was like bringing a mongoose and a cobra in a room and tell them that you guys are supposed to make nice with one another and come up with a way to divide the rat here that we both want to eat. It wasn't going to happen from the beginning. It didn't happen from the beginning, and it failed miserably. The same thing goes on in Springfield. Nobody trusts anybody, and it's not just Republicans don't trust Democrats. Democrats don't trust Democrats, and Republicans don't trust Republicans.
May I point out that I have no interest in any share of the rat?
We've got more in a moment.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the radio broadcasting program in WLCA with Mike Lemons.
Have you ever listened to your favorite radio station or your favorite disc jockey and say, you know, I could do that? Or maybe you're the type of person who says, I could never do something like that. Well, with the help of first-year mass comm student John, we're going to show you just how easy it is. Each voice intro starts with talking about the band that just played, and we add a station identifier. Next, you want to offer some information that may be of interest to your audience. And finally, tell the listeners what the next song is, who sings it, followed by another station identifier. John will do one live now.
Silver Sun Pickup substitution on WLCA. The Big Pink released their debut album called A Brief History of Love. This single is off that album. It's The Big Pink with Dominoes. It's on College Radio's Best 89.9.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
What's that? I don't know. Something I kind of made. Ooh, what's it do?
What do I do? Well, thanks for asking. I ring my bell and I like to dance. What do I do? Well, thanks for asking.
Ow! Yeah, it still needs a little work.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at inventnow.org.
Sounds like you could use some Van Gogurt. It's fortified with arts-rich nutrients to improve your math and reading skills. Catch!
Van Gogurt, thanks. So what's the deal with your ear?
Always with the ear, huh?
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
This is Metro Talk. Pat Gowans here, along with Jim Schrader. I'm Kent Scheffel. Pat, Illinois spent more than $1.1 million on the Christopher Coleman case. Chris Coleman was the person convicted of killing his wife and 2 sons back in 2009. 1.1 million, was that too much, or did we need to spend that much to ensure we had a good trial?
It was interesting, if you looked at the breakdown in the story that we broke about that, I believe the linguist hired by the state to say that words painted on the walls of the murder scene were consistent with the way he would write or talk. I think he got like $90,000, but the real linchpin of the case was Dr. Michael Baden, a famous forensic pathologist, who set a time of death that fingered Coleman, something that the local pathologist was unable to attest to, but Baden, for better or worse, says the time of death puts the finger on. Baden got like less than $5,000. So they actually got a real good bargain. I think they convicted Coleman in essence for about $5,000, and the rest of it was all window dressing. The state fund was established to make the application of the death penalty fairer. Now, by the time the Coleman case came along, the death penalty had been abolished, but was going to be abolished effective after the trial had ended. And there was no doubt that even if Coleman had received a death sentence, it would never have been carried out. The governor had commuted the sentences of the other people on death row and certainly would have done that with Coleman's as well. So the question becomes, why does the prosecution press for a death sentence that can never happen? And the answer is so they can tap the death penalty fund and get the costs, both for the prosecution side and the defense side, of pressing a capital case. This is sort of barefaced, I would say, opportunism, but Monroe County doesn't have a lot of money to press a case like this. This is more money than they spend on the criminal justice prosecution in a year for everything else. So Illinois is talking about a bill that would preserve that fund, which, by the way, has been cleaned up since the Post-Dispatch wrote about some pretty nasty abuses of the fund, but would keep that fund for major case prosecutions, particularly in small jurisdictions that can't afford that. I laud that. I'm a little nervous about the whole idea that grew up around death penalty cases, that we need to take every care, every possible care to make sure you get a fair trial if we're going to put you in prison for 10 or 20 years while we await an execution order. On the other hand, if there's no death penalty at the end of it, if we're just going to prosecute you on a crime that's going to put you in prison for 10 or 20 or 50 years, but without it being a death penalty case, well, we go to the normal system. But if the death penalty fund was predicated on the idea that we were making mistakes, that we're convicting people wrongly. And I don't know why that would be unique to first-degree murder cases, why we can't be wrongly convicting people of rapes and robberies and other crimes that put them away for a long time and ruin their lives just the same. So I worry that instead of just putting all our focus on the big, expensive cases, that we make darn sure that we're doing a good job of prosecuting everyone fairly. And that would be more expensive, and I know I'm talking about spending money at a time when there isn't any money, but I'm bothered by the emphasis on the big cases. That having been said, it's clear that small jurisdictions can't afford this, so the idea that there'd be a fund, even though it was kind of manipulated in this case, it makes sense.
Jim, $1.1 million to try the Chris Coleman case. Was that too much? Was that a good amount to ensure that we got a good trial?
Well, let's do the obverse. Let's say that the fund was not there and the state did not spend $1.1 million. And we basically went in with what Monroe County could afford, and we got an acquittal. How much do you spend to get a conviction that will put this man away for the rest of his life? Or do you potentially go in out-lawyered and, you know, and the perp walks free? In this particular case, or in my particular tax dollars, I would rather it see to some murderer going away for the rest of his life than some of the other things that the state sees fit to spend $1 million and more on. I don't. There has to be a cap somewhere. There has to be a limit somewhere. But in this particular case, for this type of a heinous crime, if it cost $1.1 million to make sure that he never sees sunlight except from behind the walls of prison, I'm fine with that.
Pat, Missouri football coach Gary Pinkel was arrested for DWI. He was suspended for a game, was losing about $300,000 in salary. Was that the right punishment for him?
Well, except for prison, that's about as strong a penalty for DUI as I've ever heard of. $300,000. My mind is drawn in so many ways. I hate drunken driving. I've seen too much of the carnage of it. I don't care if you have a death penalty for drunken drivers, let alone if they kill anybody. They're killing so many people that I abhor it. So anything that happened to him is tough luck. He seems to have manned up to it, taken responsibility. He quickly pleaded guilty, made it go away. The university tried to handle it like they would with someone else on the team. But was it one game or two? I thought he lost just one game. Oh, well. And he loses. What, he loses a raise? Is that? I think that was the deal.
His salary is frozen. He lost a week's pay, and the potential for any bowl bonus. And that's how the figure comes up to about $300,000.
I wasn't sure how that was calculated, but that's a whole lot of money. On the other hand, it's fascinating to me that a public employee, who obviously does better than the AFSCME negotiations, makes so much money, and I have no idea what he makes, that you can kind of flick off $300,000 on a DUI. God forbid he gets another one. So I don't have any sympathy for him at all. You know, he could have killed somebody. It would have been a whole lot worse. And it sort of makes me not rethink priorities, because I was aware of the enormous amount of money involved in collegiate athletics as opposed to academics has always kind of rankled me, and this just kind of rubs my nose in that a little bit. But as for him, he sounds like he was a class guy, and we'll see if he learns his lesson by whether it happens again.
You know, St. Tony LaRussa kind of dozed off at a stoplight in Florida a couple of years ago after having a few too many glasses of wine after dinner. He wasn't fined $300,000. Okay. Had a football player for the St. Louis Rams a few years ago, killed somebody after having a few nips, and he wasn't fined $300,000. It's a stiff penalty, and I'm not particularly a Mizzou fan, but it is apparent to me that the administration in Mizzou and Pinko got together and said, you know, you screwed the pooch here, bud. You know, you're going to have to face the music here. You preach at your players about not doing some of this, some of which have gotten into trouble and they got suspended. And we're going to go public with this, and we're going to make it sting, and we're going to let everybody know that you screwed up, and it's going to cost you big time. $300,000 is a lot of money. Did they make a poster child out of him? Yeah, they probably did. But I, like Pat, would like to see some more of this. We let primarily jocks and entertainers and, you know, get away with things that the three of us wouldn't be able to do. You know, an entertainer can get drunk and, you know, hit somebody with their car, and, you know, it makes Entertainment Tonight and a couple of those shows, and, you know, then it just kind of goes away, and a few checks are written, and it goes away. We get major league athletes or major broadcasters or major league coaches that do similar things, and it's news for a couple of days, and then it kind of goes away. I think they made an example of Coach Pinkel, and I suspect the next phone call he makes will be to a cab.
I lauded the cops, by the way, and another day it would have been ages to go away.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for this edition of Metro Talk. Thanks for being with us. Pat Gowan, one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch, has been here, along with Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph. I'm Ken Shuffle. We'll see you next time.